This is the beginning of a series of videos introducing the C# programming language. When we talk about C#, we really have to distinguish it from the .NET framework versus computer science. In this series of videos, we'll be using all three of these areas to build example applications and to learn how to program. Some of it is actually specific to the C# language. The syntax and the usage and the structure of the language will be introduced. But since this is a .NET language, that means we have access to the entirety of the .NET framework to do a lot of work for us, especially when we get to more sophisticated programs. So there will be pieces of the .NET framework that we use early on, even if we don't understand yet how to build, for example, a class of our own, or how to make a function of our own. We may very well make function calls early in our examples. In addition, we'll use concepts from computer science as we begin to develop our programming abilities with the C# language. We generally will be talking in an imperative and object-oriented paradigm, and along the way we'll be illustrating and learning about a variety of data structures and algorithms as both something to learn and as examples to get practice with the C# language. C# is a compiled language. Talked about this in an earlier video. Compiled languages are built at design time and then tested. It's also a statically typed language, meaning that it has specific types that you assign to a variable or object at the time that it's built. And you'll see these as words like int and string and things like that. It's also a general programming language, meaning that it can be utilized to solve a wide variety of tasks in a wide variety of fields of study. It is not a domain-specific language, which is the opposite of a general-purpose language, where you might have a language that's specific to running a statistics package, for example. And it is a .NET language. .NET is a programming environment framework. It's a rich community of resources that Microsoft has developed, and C# is one of the languages that it supports the .NET framework. And we often refer to this as a managed code programming language, meaning that a lot of the hard work that used to have to be done by the programmer is handled by the development environment for you. This video series is for beginners, so if you're an experienced programmer and you look at some of the examples that I do and you wonder why on earth is he doing it that way, that's not the way anybody would really do it in the real world, etc. These are all questions that are usually generated because this is for beginners. This is an instructional video series, not a technical video series on the proper way or the most efficient way to use a powerful language like C#. This is an introduction. As with most things in coding, there are almost always multiple ways to arrive at a solution, and some are better than others, and for a variety of reasons. Generally, in the base language, we're going to talk about storing information, looping, conditionals and branching, and function and procedure calls. Once you get beyond that, you begin to get into discussions of computer science more than the actual language itself. And we'll eventually get there, but at least at this very beginning introduction, these are the areas that we will cover. So, where are we going to go in this series? Well, part 2 is about storing information. We're going to talk about typed variables and arrays and a small bit of console programming. We're going to be using consoles to develop our initial sets of programs so that we can avoid digging too deeply into a windowed framework. Part 3 is going to be about looping. How do you run code multiple times? And there will be a variety of types of loops covered. Part 4 is going to be about conditionals and branching. with if statements and such. And part 5 will be about procedure and function calls and the structure of how you create them and how you pass information to and from a function call. This will help us to develop then a knowledge of all of the pieces that will go into a discussion of building a class. So once we have a lot of the pieces that may be necessary to build classes like variables and function calls, we can now then declare our classes. So we'll talk then about, in part 6, about defining a class and what do you do to instantiate copies of these objects that you've just developed.